Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You know who it is, and thank you for listening to this new episode of the Needle Drop Podcast. Before we get into the show, we want to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast, which means it exists because of those who support it, and they do so in a few different ways. One, they get weekly downloads of this show via a monthly subscription on our support page. We will link you to it in the description box. Looks like this, button right there. Also, you can hit up our Amazon Associates link, where basically we get a kickback for all purchases you make on Amazon.com when you use this link. Only works in the US, though, unfortunately. But you can use it to basically make purchases you were already planning on making on Amazon, and that helps out this podcast as well. Also, you can stream it on YouTube and share it with a friend. All support is appreciated. All right, thank you for listening again, and on with the show. Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for another episode of the Needle Drop Podcast, our weekly... Hey, you're jumping in early.
Yeah.
And it's our weekly interview podcast where I talk to musicians, artists, YouTubers, creators of various sorts, and in this episode, it's a very special episode, as I say in every episode, but it is special this time because I have musician and fellow YouTuber, Mr. Rob Scallon, on the show. How you doing, Rob?
Happy, buddy. Doing good. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
I will link all of you to Rob's YouTube channel down in the description box. If you don't know, Rob is a fantastic guitarist, really YouTube's preeminent sort of guitarist virtuoso, just a man of many many six-string talents. Actually, you know, he's got quite a few stringed instruments inside of his place, all of which you can catch in many of his videos, where he delivers originals, covers, even did a reverse Black Sabbath cover, which was probably one of the most insane things I'd ever seen on the internet. I love how the internet sort of provides a place where you could do something so whacked out that normally you'd probably have a hard time getting a lot of people on board to support you in doing such a thing.
Yeah, that one was particularly ridiculous. And yeah, thanks for the intro, by the way.
No problem. It was well deserved.
I just tell people I play guitar for the internet.
You should pay me to hang around you all the time and sort of introduce you to people for you.
Yeah, like my name's Rob, and he'll handle the rest. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so let me ask: is YouTube right now, the content you're creating, your music stuff, is that your full-time gig now, or coming close to your full-time gig at the moment?
Yeah. No, this has been my full-time job for a little over 2 years now. Right around previous to this, I had quite a few other jobs, but previous to this, I was mainly working at a library. And then once I hit around 35,000 subscribers, I was able to make enough to where I was able to barely live off of it.
Not usually the subscriber number that a lot of people, you know, sort of see themselves going full time on YouTube, though. Were your videos like kind of going viral around that time? Like, were you getting a lot of views, sort of that outweighed the subscriber numbers that you had?
No, not really. It was more of at that point, it was more of a risk, and I had some projects coming up later that I figured could possibly bring me into that realm to where I could make a comfortable living off of it. But certainly at 35,000 subscribers was not a comfortable living at all. But I saved up a good amount of money for years past that to where I could coast for a while. And I figured that unless I was putting all of my time into it, I couldn't really expect my channel to grow very much.
Yeah.
So no, at 35,000 subscribers, wasn't really a living wage for me, but it was close. And then I was able to really dive in and start doing it more. And I've always been like really in tune with the business side of things too. Like that's also kind of, other than just something I have to do, it's also kind of a hobby and something I enjoy. So at that point, I had a good amount of revenue streams in place, and none of them were anything super significant. But when you put them together, they were at least enough to where I knew I could almost get by and then do the rest of my savings.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with content creating online. You kind of can't just rely on the money coming from the ad revenue that YouTube might, sort of make from your videos. So you've got to have a lot of different irons in the fire.
Absolutely. Yeah, like if you're relying strictly on AdSense, you either need to be, well, first off, to make a living off that, you need to be mega popular.
You've got to be Tyler Oakley.
Yeah, or like like PewDiePie, as we hear a lot. Of course, if for a channel like his, it's definitely significant, but for most people, overwhelmingly, it's not. But yeah, even if you are really hyperly successful on YouTube and you're relying just on AdSense, that's pretty unstable. If your popularity goes down a little bit, like so does your income.
Sure, absolutely. And, especially for someone like you who, you're trying to make videos that sort of have this wide appeal, but are also, very shareable, very creative. And some videos, like that Sandman video that you did sort of ended up just being wildly popular and just really took off. Whereas some of your other videos, don't see quite as few shares. And, you've got to kind of, it's a bit of a shot in the dark all the time. I always find your videos entertaining as a fan.
Thanks.
But, even I, as a fan, can't really predict like, oh, this video is going to go totally viral, or this video, so you're kind of, I guess, at the mercy of whether or not your fans want to share your content with their friends a little bit when you're coming out with new stuff. So you've got to have other projects kind of on the back burner to kind of get your hardcore fans looped into that, so you can just kind of keep things going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least for my channel, to expect every video to go into the millions is just not realistic at all. So, and if I was relying strictly on AdSense, that would be what I was doing, or what I would have to do. Every video would need to be this like big million hit video, and yeah, of course, that's very unrealistic.
If that was kind of the position that you were in, or the position that you were putting yourself in, are there limitations that you feel like you would need to put on your artistic process or your creative process in some of these videos to kind of keep those numbers up?
I guess, I would say so, because if I needed every video to be this big viral thing, which wouldn't be what I wouldn't be comfortable with doing that at all, just like on a stress level. Sure. I would just have a regular part-time job and do it on the side. But yeah, if I did, then I would definitely spend a whole lot less. I would have to spend a whole lot less time doing like original work, which doesn't go viral, but that stuff I'm, just as more interested in. So yeah, it would very much change my creative process if I was doing that route.
As far as your original work goes, I feel like as a YouTube musician, or somebody who's, I guess, known more for their musicianship on YouTube than in kind of their solo stuff, how exactly do you balance those two kinds of worlds? Because when I listen to your solo work, I hear some very beautiful, melodic, very serious music, but then on the YouTube side of things, and you have put your originals up on your YouTube channel, things tend to run a little bit more lighthearted and, just silly and playful, but still like creative and out there. I kind of feel like as a YouTube musician, maybe you kind of have this freedom to break away from seriousness that some other rock musicians or musicians who are kind of deep into the music industry don't necessarily have. Yeah,
I do. That is something I'm really fortunate for. Like, as a YouTube musician, I can pretty much do whatever I want, and as long as there's a good amount of people that are also into it, I can continue doing it. And that's really great. I don't think I would want to, I mean, if that was my only option, it's definitely better than other things I could be doing with my life. But if I had to just do, quote unquote serious stuff, or just do quote unquote comedy stuff, I wouldn't be very fulfilled doing one of either. Like, I really enjoy switching around all the time. I wouldn't want to do all originals or do all comedy stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, we're really fortunate in that way, in that we have a creative job, but also one that isn't very limiting. Being on YouTube, I can move around to a bunch of different things, and yeah, it's fun.
I'm just sort of thinking about the kind of interesting world that you thrive in business-wise, because it seems like you and a lot of other YouTube musicians out there have tons and tons and tons of fans, but there's like this really grave lack of acknowledgement from the traditional music industry. And the thing is, you have label reps that are trying to sling the latest records from, the newest pop star who they're trying to make a hit, who, if you accumulated all of their fans, they probably have much less listeners than you and a lot of other people on YouTube who some of these A&R people are completely deaf to. It's just kind of a weird. It just kind of seems like a weird thing. It's sort of like how traditional TV and media ignores, what YouTubers are doing as far as like, dramas and comedies and sketch comedy and all that.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways the tradition, quote unquote traditional media hasn't really caught up yet, and they might really like to believe that the internet creators are somehow illegitimate when they're not. But I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting, exciting world to be in. I don't have any, or I have a very, very small amount of interest in doing anything in the traditional music industry. The internet is where I want to be, and yet that whole other world doesn't really interest me at all.
You're talking about how traditional media isn't really catching up with what YouTube is doing. Is that a wall that you see breaking down eventually, or do you think these kinds of these two worlds are always going to be separate in some kind of way?
Yeah, well, I think they have to. They're going to have to melt, and now they're starting to. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But pretty soon, almost all media is going to be online media. So, they're going to have to adapt. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But at least for now, online creators aren't taken quite as seriously as if they were, traditional, whatever.
It's kind of weird to see what traditional, bits of media are taking online creators seriously, though, because and even I've had this. Numerous YouTubers have come out with books. I don't know what it is.
I was going to say that.
I don't know what it is about being a YouTuber that makes book companies be like, let's get these people to make books. But
it's so weird that those two come together, like books. Super traditional and old school. They're the ones that are like really catching up on YouTubers.
They're actually reaching across the aisle. Meanwhile, the TV execs are like, "Hell no, we're not putting any of these people on TV."
Yeah, that is really odd. And I tweeted recently that, hey, I'm coming out with a book, and then I said something like, no, I just wanted to be part of the club. I just figured out I wasn't a YouTuber yet until I come out with a book. But that is funny. Tons of YouTubers are coming out with books.
Yeah,
it's a huge thing.
As a musician, who is voluntarily kind of working outside of this traditional, kind of music industry world. And not that I'm asking you to sort of name names here or anything, but you live in Chicago, where quite a few, successful musicians who have gone down that avenue live. And, I'm sure that you play out quite a bit and people have seen you play and recognize your talent. Do you ever sort of cross paths with people who are kind of in that industry? And, is there any kind of like weirdness or animosity there, or kind of lack of understanding for what you're doing or for what they're doing?
Well, actually, I don't ever play out in Chicago.
Oh, really?
Ever. Yeah. The only time I've played a show in Chicago as a solo art. Well, I guess I played recently. I play with Driftless Pony Club.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah. So we played a show in Chicago where I just opened up for them, and then I played drums for them. At Reggie's, and then for the last tour, Because Awesome, we played the Metro, which was a ton of fun. But other than those two occurrences in the last 5-6 years, I never play out. So just no, I'm just not in tune with that world really at all.
Now, is that just something that you're not interested in, or because of the multiple irons that you have in the fire, that's just not something you even really need to do?
It's kind of a mix of both. A big part of it too is I'm just not interested in playing live as a solo artist unless I'm playing with my friends, like with Tour Because Awesome, for example, or with Driftless Pony Club. That's a ton of fun, but I don't really have any interest in like going out and bringing all my equipment to a venue and setting up by myself, playing by myself, leaving by myself. Just as a solo artist, like that doesn't sound that fun to me, and it's not. And as you said, being a lot of irons in the fire, if you will, or having a lot of or other revenue streams or things that are taking up my time, I don't really have time for it, and it's just not. Yeah, playing live just isn't something I'm that interested in. And with my stuff too, I kind of how I work is I'll, for a week or a month or whatever it is, I'll just focus on one song that I'm writing, one video, and then once it's done, I don't play it ever again. So for me to start playing live again, I would need to relearn like all of my songs that I would want to play live. Yeah,
because recording is one thing, but sort of learning to perform what you're writing is another beast.
Yeah, totally. It's a completely other thing that I'm not that interested in, and I don't think I would really enjoy all that much. Maybe later on down the line, if I have a bigger audience where I could tour the country and do with my friends, that would be great. I get to do that with Tour Because Awesome, which is fantastic, and it's a ton of fun. But well, yeah, I don't know. It's not something I'm interested in.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I mean, really, the resounding consensus around the campfire, pretty much with every music industry person who I talk to or I hear writing some kind of think piece, is that no artist is making money off their music anymore. You can't sell your music. Everybody's, nobody's making money off of being creative. Everybody's making money off of merch and touring. Yeah. And you're obviously not touring, and merch is only one of the things that you do. So
yeah, I'm actually not even in the merch, really. I would love to be in the merch game, but it's just not something I've ever been able. I've never put together any merchandise that I've been excited about. And as a solo artist where I use my own name, it's kind of weird to just like put my name on things. Like I don't really feel comfortable doing that. Like if I had an alias or something, that would be one thing, but to just, I don't know, put my name on things, I think would be weird.
Well, I mean, it doesn't even have to be your name. It could be your bright, shining, smiling face.
Just like with the thumbs up or something.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I know that there is merch opportunities. Like a lot of other YouTubers, that's like their main source of income.
Yeah,
and certainly with traditional music, it is. But it's just never. I would love to do it, and if I had things that I was really excited about, I would love to do it. I think merch for me going forward, my version of merch is more signature gear. I have a signature guitar that me and Chapman Guitars are working on right now that I'm super excited about. And like maybe custom pedals or custom picks, like that stuff might be my version of merch if that gets rolling.
Well, you did an interesting thing where I think after an original track that you had put out and you dropped a video for it, you had framed the strings that were on the guitar.
Yeah,
that you were playing.
Yeah, that was fun. So, and I think it's cool now to know that Anchor is probably, out of my originals, at least one of my most popular tracks, and to know that the strings that were actually on the recording are, framed and hanging up in people's houses all over the world is really cool. And it was my version of a physical release, like because I didn't do CDs for that. EP, I didn't do vinyls or anything. So if people want to own the music, I think this is as close as you could get to it. You're actually owning the thing that made the sound to begin with.
I think what you actually need to do is just buy dozens of packs of guitar strings, just put them on your guitar, play the song once, and then pack them up, and then play the song once on a new set of strings, and be like, each set of strings I send you, this song has been played on them, I swear to you, and then just shoot a video of you just like marathon playing this song on each set of strings.
I think that'd be a little weird. I think it's more about which one is on the recording, but not just like which ones happen to play the song at one point.
Hey, if you do that and it sells, pretty soon you'll just be able to start selling your own sweat.
This is the sweat these are the blood, sweat, and tears physically that went into this recording.
Yes, here's the sweat generated during playing this song 100 times on 100 different set of strings.
Oh God, you scrape off the skin follicles of the strings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that'd be weird. So other than that, I would like to do merch going forward. And the signature guitar, holy crap, I'm so excited about it. Like I have to stop myself from thinking about it sometimes, or else I get so excited that it's hard to do anything else.
I definitely want to come back to that and talk about some of the music that kind of inspires you as well. But I got a few more questions about just like you as a YouTuber.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of where do you kind of see your videos and your original music kind of progressing into the future? I just kind of feel like you've got so much to be conscious of, and artists, especially in the traditional music industry, are so conscious about where their sound is kind of going next. Are you as focused or as worried about that kind of thing, or do you feel like you're just kind of able to, I don't know, just allow ideas to naturally pop into your head, and you're not so much worried about a narrative or a progression to your music or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say, I'd rather just what I'm interested in and what ideas just naturally come to me, or what I'm going to work on. I think back again on us being YouTubers, we're really fortunate in that usually you just start your channel because it's something you're really into and you're just making stuff that you enjoy. And then along the way, if you work at it and you're also really fortunate enough, you find a lot of other people that are into the same things. And hopefully, my thought is I just continue to work on things that I'm interested in, and my audience is similar enough to me to where they'll also find interest in it. And I think that's, at least for me, I think that's the best way to go about it. I think once I start spending too much time making things that I just think will do well, and once I'm not interested in them, that really comes across in the videos. So yeah, I think just what naturally comes to me is what I think I should be working on.
All right. So moving on to, it does. And moving on to this whole guitar business, when kind of crafting a custom guitar, kind of, I imagine in the process of doing so, you're trying to make a guitar that you really want to hear and that you yourself would really want to play. What is it about the sound of a certain guitar that kind of, really grabs your attention, or just like, really picks your ear up, and really just kind of registers to you as like a really good quality, amazing guitar sound? What is it in the sound of a guitar that you sort of look for when you're playing guitars, when you're hearing other people play guitars? I personally do have kind of my favorites and my least favorites as far as like the major kinds of guitar brands go. But where have you kind of seen yourself gravitate over the years?
Geez. Well, in this case, I think something a little bit different. And in this case, what's different about it is that it's an 8-string. We're doing an 8-string and a 6-string version. And I guess the main thing I look for, at least in a signature, like I play a lot of different instruments, and depending on the genre, of course, I'll gravitate towards different instruments that are more geared towards that genre. When it comes to the signature, I really want something that can be versatile. So, and which is a little bit different with a regular signature. So I guess I would like to see it played in a whole lot of different ways. And in that case, we're making it to where it can do that. Like I can't go actually into the specs of the guitar. So this one's a hard one to answer, in that we've all decided that we don't want to talk about the specs of the guitar yet, because we might want them to change later. Okay,
that totally makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So,
well, I mean, I've heard you play some of those Chapman guitars on your videos before, and they seem to have just like a really, really super clean ringing quality to them, just like a really just very pristine sound to them. Not a whole lot of dirt or grit or anything like that. They're just like super duper. It's like listening to glass.
Yeah, and that's what I like about them. That you can take that and then use effects or whatever to bring it in any direction.
Sure.
But you just get this really clean DI sound they can do a lot with. And I'm trying to not talk about specific specs about this one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I have for the H string, I can't talk about this. Like a lot of H strings, at least in the market where they're not super expensive, you're always going to find an H string that's specifically geared towards metal, and it looks metal, and it's everything inside of it is made for super distorted tones. And we wanted to make something that hopefully will appeal to a market of people that want to use this extended range to do things other than that. Also can do that well, but can do a lot of other things.
It seems like metal is a big influence for you sometimes, though. Yeah,
it is. And it will gent, but it will also do other things.
Yeah, certainly gent, which in your videos before you have consciously poked fun at. But
yeah, I think it's...
Is it something also simultaneously that you enjoy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy that stuff a lot. And most of what if you'd say I make fun of stuff, that are things that I'm a fan of. But I just think it's fun to not take it too seriously and also, I don't know, point out some of the funny things about it.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it comes from a place of fandom, which I think is why places like Metal Sucks love the shit out of your videos. Anything that's metal related, they post it right away.
Yeah, they've been really good to me. Yeah, like Metal Sucks and Metal Injection.
Yeah,
good to me. I think the next one I'm working on, I think they'll post as well. It's what I'm currently working on. I'm really excited about. It's another thing I like kind of pokes fun at gent, but in a loving way.
Mm-hmm. It also seems like certainly math rock is like a point of inspiration for you too.
Yeah.
Talking about these genres, can you maybe sort of I think some of your influences in the metal world, like Metallica and Slayer, are very clear, coming through in your videos. But are there any sort of other artists, big or small, who you haven't directly covered or referenced in your videos that you would consider yourself to be a big fan of?
Yeah, I think the biggest example for me, and I would say the biggest inspiration musically of my whole life, would be Primus. And I've never done a Primus song or ever really any video that mentioned them directly, but overall they would be my biggest musical influence. I got really into them in middle school. I actually the first band that I was obsessed with was Metallica in middle school. But then quickly after that it went on to Primus, and then that was a whole other thing. And once I got into them, it's like, all right, I need to be a musician. I need to go buy a bass. I need to figure out how to play Let's Play Pool.
You started with the bass?
Yeah, that was the first instrument.
That band would make you want to play bass.
Yeah. And what really interests me about that band, and this I think for me comes across certainly in what I do, though it's not quite as obvious, is that they played their instruments in really weird ways.
Sure.
And really different ways, and had different instruments. And they made incredible music videos that were really out there.
Oh, yeah.
So those two things I was really, really interested in. And prior to that, I had kind of dabbled with music. We had a drum set, my brother and I, but it was kind of a hobby. But after getting really into Primus, I needed to learn how to play stringed instruments. And
well, also that Primus is easily one of the funniest rock bands on the planet. and you certainly have seemed to find a balance between, your own take on musicianship, your own take on virtuosity, as well as your own take on comedy. I mean, you don't play like someone who's a huge Primus fan, and you don't have the same type of sense of humor, but you've found a balance between those things too.
Yeah, there's a pretty thick layer of humor in what they do, and certainly in what I do. Though it's very different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for the record, that was definitely a band I was obsessed with.
Oh yeah,
late high school, early college as well. I think there was at one point I owned every one of their records up to Anti-Pop, and yeah, even some Les Claypool solo CDs too.
Yeah, I have all those. The biggest thing, did you have the DVD Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People?
Oh, no, I did not have that, but I had like some, I had pirated a few videos off of it because that was kind of that was the golden age of that too, sort of downloading stuff off of person-to-person sites.
LimeWire, and it would take like 8 hours for like a 5-minute video.
Okay, great. We're both incriminating ourselves in this podcast. Good.
Yeah, well, that was like the early YouTube. I remember going over to my friend Nick's house, and he would just find all these music videos, and we would have to queue up like, okay, we want to watch this one, and this one. We would queue it up and then leave, and then come back, and by that time, a half hour later, most likely they would be downloaded, and we would watch them a ton. One of them was, I remember, War Ensemble by Slayer. We watched that one a bajillion times and tried to learn it, and at that time, it was, I'm sure what we were playing sounded horrible. But we tried our best. But yeah, when I say I got really into Primus, I even more specifically meant I got really into the Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People DVD. To the point where, like, my friends and I, especially my friend Jonathan, who was really, like, to the point where it was probably unhealthy how into Primus he was. We even go as far as to memorize the commentary. Like, we would be hanging out and riding our bikes or something, and we would be able to recite big parts of just the commentary on like some of the B-side videos. It was a huge part of our life at that point. So I'm sure the guys at Primus are probably, not that I don't know if they've ever stumbled across me, but I'm sure they've probably heard that a million times. They're like, yeah, we know. We know we influence you and everyone else. Or at least,
No, it's true. It's interesting just how much like weird, kooky rock music they made in the 90s and in the 2000s that influenced quite a few people, but in the long run, they haven't seemed to have, I guess, held as much critical acclaim as I thought they would have, or I would have liked them to.
Yeah.
And I think it weirdly enough, it just kind of comes with the territory of, I think, just being a band with a strong sense of humor. For whatever reason, no matter how good you play, it seems like people are just going to take you less seriously generally if you're throwing jokes into your songs.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But that's more of a rant than it is a question.
I would agree, and I think just in that, I just think in their specific genre of being, I don't know if you've used this term before, but we would at the time, which it's kind of musicians' music, and I think that genre is limiting if you try to think of like a mainstream scale. Like you can have a lot of really, really fans that are really, really dedicated, but having a tremendous amount of fans that are somewhat dedicated it seems like there's kind of a glass wall there.
Okay, that's an interesting term and an interesting avenue to go down. In your opinion, what is it that makes something musicians' music? Because I don't know if it comes strictly down to virtuosity. I mean, lots of. I don't think anybody would refer to something like Pink Floyd to be musicians' music. But
yeah.
But they're one of the most significant progressive rock bands ever. And I don't know. I mean, Rush's music is quite flashy, and a lot of musicians are hardcore into them. I mean, you're talking about one of the bands that has 3 of the best musicians on their respective instruments ever in one group. But I don't think anybody would refer to Rush as just simply musicians' music. But for Primus, though, I guess that term seems a little fitting.
Yeah, well, I think it's not only that. I don't think you would get that term by just being incredible at your instruments, but being incredible at your instruments in a way that doesn't appeal to a mainstream audience. I feel like maybe I'm wrong about this. I could totally be wrong about this, but
you could be wrong. I'm just asking for your opinion on it.
Yeah. But I think with Primus, it's a certain type of genre that maybe you have to play to totally appreciate. Like, it's a little bit off the path to where if you didn't have that type of background, if music wasn't that big a part of your life, you might not appreciate it. That's I don't know.
I think I hear what you're getting at. I mean, there's great playing on a Primus record, but the way that they play their instruments doesn't sound traditional in any kind of sense.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a weird and abrasive, and
it's not going to appeal to a super mainstream audience like I think Rush or Pink Floyd would.
Sure, absolutely. Or I guess what you could also say, a guy like Buckethead would be sort of musician's music. It's not even that it's musician's music, but it's musician nerd music. Like you're so good at your instrument that like just playing it normally absolutely bores you, and you're like, I want to find out a way, or I want to hear other musicians playing this guitar here in a really weird way. And then once you're kind of pushing it to the point where the instrument is no longer making, just regular sounds, you're going to start to turn people off. But, by that same token, you have some bands that do that, but they get lumped into that noise rock category and somehow end up getting that critical acclaim and, that long-term sort of I guess classic denomination, like a band like Sonic Youth or something.
Yeah, so there's just so many factors to go into it. It's hard to pinpoint what would make something only appeal to musicians.
Yeah, it's true, and that's the thing. I mean, Sonic Youth is definitely an example of a group who don't play their instruments in a particularly traditional way at all. But rarely do I ever hear guitar virtuosos talking up Sonic Youth. And in fact, I mean, when I have talked with those people, they don't seem to take the playing of a guy like Thurston Moore all that seriously, because while it is avant-garde, I don't think I mean, you could obviously look at what he's doing and see that it's not studied in the same way that a guy like Buckethead's playing is very studied and very honed and very practiced. It seems like Thurston is more in it for just the texture of what he's doing, rather than just kind of the virtuosity of it. Yeah,
and that will, of course, appeal to a more mainstream audience. I have kind of a funny story about Buckethead.
Sure.
Well, kind of somewhat. The first concert I saw was C2B3, which was Buckethead at the Metro in Chicago. And then I think it was maybe my second concert. I went to the Metro again in Chicago to see Buckethead. And recently on tour with Tour Because Awesome, we got to play the Metro, and we sold more tickets to that show than anywhere else, which was really gratifying. And I went in there and I was talking to the sound guys. I'm like, yeah, my first concert was here, and it's really cool to play here again. They're like, oh, that's awesome. I'm like, yeah, I saw Buckethead here. And then immediately he was like, he was like judging me super hard and stopped talking to me. Apparently,
because what, you liked Buckethead?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I guess the sound guy at the Metro does not like Buckethead at all. Like he was really offended that I was happy to play in the same place that Buckethead did.
Dude, it's your venue. You let him play here.
Yeah, but he seemed offended that's why I liked the Metro.
Okay. Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, there's definitely a stigma sometimes when people can just play their instruments super duper well, which I'm sure that you've experienced.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I think in this case, I heard him later mumbling about Guns N' Roses. I think he was a really big Guns N' Roses fan.
Oh, okay. So that might be why he took it personally.
Maybe, and I'm not too familiar with Guns N' Roses. I know that Buckethead was in it at one point.
Yeah. I think it might have to do with like loyalty to Slash or something like that. I really have no idea.
Yeah, maybe his whole life he grew up idolizing Slash, and that's what offended him, is that he was Slash's replacement.
And as far as the stigma that I'm talking about, I mean, it's not really that strong, or I guess it sort of depends on what circles you hang in. And I think I don't think somebody who's doing what you do would kind of run into it all that often. I think it sort of depends on what you're famous for and kind of at what level of popularity you're at. Like I see a guy like Steve Vai kind of cast off very often as just being this guy who, just plays this just very noodly, soulless guitar solos that don't really mean or amount to anything. He's just like, basically masturbating on stage, but he's doing it with a guitar, and everybody's just like, oh,
yeah,
wow,
well,
wow.
I know the criticism you're talking about. Another extreme example would be Michelangelo Badio.
Sure.
Yeah, he's probably the most extreme example, or like Yngwie Malmsteen, where people have that like, oh, he's just showing off the whole time. It's not musical or whatever. But
sure.
I mean, yeah, I think most people won't be into that type of noodly stuff, but some people are, and I do think that even if it is just like doing tricks on your instrument, I certainly think there's value in that. It's a show, and if you're into guitars, you might be interested in watching someone do a lot of tricks on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a guitar player, kind of watching people execute at that really high level of performance can be really entertaining. And I think it's like we were saying earlier. Performance is really kind of a different beast. There are a lot of people, I think, probably on a smaller scale could do a lot of the stuff that Steve Vai could do, and I'm sure that you could pull off some of that stuff as well. But sort of knowing that you could jump on stage and just do it all so flawlessly, like with absolutely no breaks in between all of the things that you're doing, is really daunting. Yeah,
it would stress me out to perform like that. There's so many notes to miss.
Well, I mean, if you break a sweat, you could just do like Steve Vai and have a bunch of fans at the front of the stage so that it's blowing your beautiful hair backwards behind your head as you're just like executing these awesome guitar moves.
Isn't there? What's that? There's that band Steel Panther that kind of parodied like that type of mentality. Mm-hmm. Well, not in so much in like always shredding, but like they'll have fans on stage and just like super egotistical. I frankly don't know too much about Steve Vai, honestly, so I really can't comment on his stuff. I'm not that familiar.
I mean, he's pretty flashy. I mean, in the I don't know his early history, but kind of his first big break was that back in the day, Frank Zappa would use him to transcribe his guitar solos and his writing so that it could either be worked into sort of a larger, more classical type composition, or so that it could kind of maybe even be marked down for like a recording that he was working on, a rock recording.
Interesting. So that's how he got into the industry. Is he?
I believe that was his first big break. He's actually been invited multiple times, at least during the first one, because I caught it, to that Zappa Plays Zappa tour. And I believe that he was instrumental in making sure that his Zappa's son on that tour was up to snuff when it came to performing a lot of his dad's guitar parts and solos. And, and he was there on stage too, playing these tracks, so there is kind of that big Zappa connection with Steve Vai and
I had
what
no
he's doing.
idea that he even knew him.
Oh yeah.
Right. On Steve Vai.
So
the main thing I know about Steve Vai is that he has that, other than if you consider the Les Paul a signature guitar, he has the most successful signature guitar model.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he has the one with on the guitar, there's the cutout for you to carry it from the top. Mm-hmm. It's at least to my knowledge, is the highest selling signature guitar other than the Les Paul.
As far as not just Les Pauls, but just kind of the major guitar brands out there right now, do you often find yourself like, in kind of the big box stores and music shops, looking for new guitars and trying new guitars out, or is the pick of the litter just not what it used to be, unless you're shelling out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars?
Yeah. I don't find myself in, other than Chicago Music Exchange is really, really cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of their stuff is really, really expensive, but I'll often go in there and just poke around and like buy smaller stuff like pedals, but then still kind of gaze at the the really expensive guitars. But for me, in an instrument, I don't necessarily look at brand name too much. And a lot of the guitar world too is strangely geared towards vintage stuff. You know, it's all about like this is exactly.
It kind of seems like that's a recently occurring thing. I mean, not only are a lot of those vintage instruments, going for just top dollar right now, but I believe it's Fender has been recently coming out with these quote unquote road worn instruments.
Yeah. What are they called? Relic guitars.
Yes.
They have someone just like hit it with a hammer and like like ruin it, and then they sell it. Yeah, and then they sell it to you. And I don't know that type of stuff, or just this whole like vintage craze. This whole like I want a guitar that is exactly like if my grandfather went into the store and bought one. Like that doesn't appeal to me at all. So like to me, I that whole mentality I don't really get. Like, are there other industries that do that to this extent? Like Ford keeps pumping out like the Model T every year and be like, this is exactly like the first Model T, and everyone's just driving Model Ts around.
Sure.
I don't know. It doesn't to me. When I look for an instrument, it's mainly I look for something new about it that makes me play it a little bit differently. Like that's what I'm interested in. Like if I'm just looking around the room, like I have my 9-string, of course, around here, and having 3 extra strings, it's like, oh, I got to learn how to play this a little bit differently. Or like I just got a Chapman guitar that has a tremolo on it, a Floyd Rhodes. I've never used that before. Or just like 5-string bass, just something that's a little bit different about it that's going to force me to play it differently. That's more what I look for. That's what interests me, rather than like what brand it is even. I guess if that makes sense.
You're so damn excessive, Rob. I mean, so many strings.
More strings.
Are you the guy who goes into the store like sees other people online with something like a 12-string bass or a 16-string bass, and you're like, oh my god. Yes, this all day.
Yeah. If it's like new and different, and if I picked it up and you have to play it differently, that is what interests me. So yeah, I am one of those people.
Sort of working, the thing about modern music recording and amplifiers and pedals too, is that the technology, while it has kept up with the times in a sense, it's also progressed with sort of those more low-scale string instruments in mind. I don't think a lot of bass amplifiers or cabinets are engineered with the 12-string bass in mind. Do you think that that's just kind of a weird niche thing and will continue to be so, or do you think this string excessiveness is going to continue and kind of change standards?
Well, I don't think it's going to continue in that pretty soon we're all going to be playing 13 strings.
Yeah.
But I do think extended range isn't a gimmick and it's going to stick around. I don't think it's going to be... I don't think an 8-string guitar is ever going to be... Well, I don't know. It's going to be standard for most genres, but I think it's not a novelty, and it's something that'll be around for a while. I don't know. Does that answer that question?
No, I think it does. Well, I mean, I think.
We'll see. Who knows? Maybe people won't even be playing guitars in 5 years.
Well, I mean, that's a possibility too, and that's a question that I actually not the specific question, but just kind of the future. What you think the future of guitar music is. But the thing is, for a while, there was, specifically in the 2000s, it seemed like there was this budding market for this extended range and these extra strings. And but the thing is, in the music industry, these guitars weren't really being given as much stage time as you would assume, given that you see them in all the stores. But it seems like gent is really the first genre where these kinds of guitars are seeing like incredible representation.
Yeah.
Like consistently from one band to the next.
Yeah. And I think that's cool. I think that's my opinion on it. I think it's new and it's interesting and it's cool.
So, I asked you more about, just more traditional metal and rock that people that you're into, that people might not have assumed that you were, that maybe you didn't mention or overtly like reference in a video. Are there any sort of gent groups that you kind of see yourself consistently going back to their records again and again and again?
Not really. There honestly, recently there's not many records in general that I keep going back to over and over again. Other than Kendrick's last album. Like, the music I've been really getting into recently doesn't have guitars in it at all. And I think that might just be because I spend so much time making guitar-y music that, I don't know. I'm at least currently in the last year, I'm always moving around to what I'm listening to. And there's not any particular bands right now that I listen to a lot, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, it most certainly does. And you're talking about, I mean, you essentially play with your guitar all day. I imagine when you're kind of relaxing that you're not just wanting to hear other people kind of play their guitars. I imagine it kind of, is it hard for you sometimes to sit back and listen to guitar music and kind of turn off that critical ear that I'm sure that you have because of how of a precise of a musician that you are?
No, I think I would say that I can't listen to it without thinking about the technique that went into playing guitar. So I do think that has something to do with it. Like when I first started listening to, say, Primus or Buckethead, for example, there was a big wow factor, you know? Like, I would watch, when I went to that show for Buckethead, I would watch him play, or I would watch Primus, and it would be like, I have no idea how they're doing that. How is this sound made? And there was a certain fascination and wonder in it that now isn't there. And I
ruined it.
Yeah. Not that I ruined it. It's just I've experienced it so much that that initial wow factor maybe isn't there.
Sure.
But I still do really, really enjoy that music. It's just not, so, you know, some guitar players, or especially even some metal fans, it's like all metal, all guitar all the time. And that's not particularly my listening habits. It's, for me, it's all over the place all the time. But what I create is always guitar based.
Well, I mean, while I love a lot of guitar music, I feel like simply listening to guitar music can kind of be a little limiting, especially if you're an artist who plays guitar. Because it kind of becomes like a bit of an echo chamber situation. Whereas, I mean, you've listened to stuff like that Kendrick record, and you've taken it upon yourself to recreate that music on your guitar, where I don't think that would sort of dawn on a lot of guitarists, sort of doing that sort of thing.
That was a really fun video, by the way. I really enjoy trying to play genres on instruments that usually aren't made for that genre. That's always like an interesting thing to do for me. And that video in particular was a lot of fun because I am a big fan of Kendrick's work.
Going into the future, and I've heard people kind of predict this before, although I've never taken it very seriously because there continues to be guitars very prominently on numerous recordings throughout the year, obscure and mainstream. But, you know, where do you sort of see guitar music going in the future? You know, is there always going to be a place for it? I mean, while I think the mainstream is a lot less rock driven than it used to be, it certainly seems like there's still room for guitars, you know, just not necessarily in a rock context. It's the guitar. I mean, people forget that the guitar predates rock music, you know, and it's a very versatile instrument, and that's all it really is at the end of the day. It's an instrument. It's not a symbol of any one particular genre. And I think that if guitars are going to continue to have a seat at the table, musicians are going to need to remind themselves the other things the guitar can do other than play rock and metal music.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see guitars going away in popular culture anytime soon. I guess if you look far enough into the future, you know, people aren't going to be around. So I'm sure at some point we're going to forget about guitars.
Sure.
But I don't see that happening anytime soon. And I see them to continue. As you said, they're so versatile. I see what people see as guitar music evolving rather than people finding a different instrument to play it on, or maybe the instruments change in a little way. I mean, I don't know. I don't see it certainly going away anytime soon.
And right now, from your perspective, where do you kind of see that evolution going? You know, maybe you can't tell me where, you know, if you can't tell me where you think things are going to be from 5 years from now, for example, you know, is there anything going on right now in guitar music that you would have found to be completely surprising maybe several years ago?
Man, I don't know. There's just so much going on. This is more on like music in general. Just with the internet, there's so many different subgenres and so many different types of music that it's kind of hard to pinpoint like what guitars are doing right now. You know, like I don't know. That I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, you just kind of focus on your own thing.
Yeah, for me, I'm just going to continue doing what I find interesting, and hopefully, you know, other people will continue to find it interesting too. And maybe, you know, me and my other YouTube guitarists will have a big part in how guitars are seen later. You know, that would be cool. Or maybe we'll just have a big part in getting more people to pick up a guitar. Mm-hmm. That would be something I can be really proud of.
I mean, it seems like that's definitely the case for you right now. I mean, with how some people receive your videos and see.
I would hope so, because I think if what I'm working on is getting more people to play guitar or play any instrument really, and I put out a lot of tabs for my songs, and I really encourage people to learn them in like post cover videos and stuff. And if what I'm doing is getting more people to play music, then that's something I can be really proud of. Though I don't think at this point I've had a very significant. I don't think I've been super significant in that, but if I do it at all, that's great.
One more question before, you know, I just sort of remind everybody of how great you are and what you do and where they can find you.
Well, thanks. I think I've been doing pretty bad on this podcast. I feel like I don't know how to answer any of these questions.
I think you've been doing good. You know, this podcast is more conversational than it is about, you know, like, oh, did you give the great answer?
Yeah.
You know, it's but
I do love. I guess just on podcasts real quick, I spend an enormous amount of time listening to podcasts. Like a huge part of my practice routine, if I do have a practice routine, is just turning on a podcast of people talking and playing guitar for like 2 hours. That's like if you took a pie chart of my life, that's a gigantic slice of my life is just playing and practicing while listening to podcasts.
I sometimes do that too, and it's really weird, but I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, obviously it obviously seems to not be a danger, since, you know, you telling me that you're doing that and you're playing so well, but simultaneously, and maybe this isn't anything new. I'm sure there are people who back in the day probably practiced their guitar while listening to the radio, listening to the radio or watching TV or maybe at a family gathering or something. But it seems like so reflective of the times that we always need to have something going on in the background, like as
multitasking. I can't just enjoy this one thing. I need to be listening to a podcast while I don't know, having a massage on my feet while doing this, while playing a video game with my right hand. You know, so I don't know. I guess years ago I probably wouldn't have done that. I probably would. Well, you know, come to think of it, way back I would watch TV a lot while playing. So I don't know. I think maybe it's something that's always been around. I'm not sure, but it helps me a lot. Like it helps me just not be distracted just enough to where I am just playing for fun. And I find I stumble across things more often that then turn into songs if I'm also listening to podcasts at the same time and focusing on what people are talking about.
Well, you know, part of the creative process, I think part of the key to the creative process is being able to kind of clear your mind and relax a little bit.
Yeah, and that's something I find probably is the most challenging thing to do about it.
And when you're kind of stressing yourself out over the fact that you're not coming up with the amazing idea that you're trying to come up with right then and there with the guitar, with whatever in your hand, sometimes you know, that inspiration strikes when you're able to clear your head or just have things a little calmer. And with that distraction in the background, sometimes calmness is a little easier to attain.
I could not have said it better. I completely agree. I struggle with that and I always have, to where I start playing and then I stumble upon something small. And if I'm so focused on it, I'm like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the song. Maybe this is the most popular song I'm ever going to have. I better not mess this up. And then I mess it up. There's these, I find with being a full-time creative person, there's two modes you need to be able to switch in and out of. One's the creative mode, where you need to not be worried about business or success or making things at all.
Sure.
And you need to just be doing it for fun, to write things that you're going to like. And on the other side of it, you also need to have the business side, and being in one mindset and doing the other never works. It's you either need to be one or the other, and know when those are going on. If that makes sense. I find it's really, really easy to, when I get into creative mode, to snap into business mode, and then creative mode's gone and I can't write songs anymore. And it's really, really hard if I'm in a business mode, like I get on the computer, I'm replying to emails or I'm editing or something, to go, once I'm in that mode, I can't create anything for the rest of the day, at least anything that I'm going to like. I can phone it in, but to really write a song that I'm going to enjoy a lot, I need to not be worrying about writing songs, which is a weird dynamic. To try to be productive, while simultaneously, to be productive, you need to not worry about being productive.
As far as original work goes, and I know that obviously this is still a focus for you, and this is a really important thing to you, obviously. Given with how easy it is to sort of put this unwanted pressure onto yourself to be like, oh, I gotta write this really amazing thing, or this is the one. Is it ever in the back of your head, even though, in a way you're kind of rejecting the idea of this traditional music industry thing, because it can be harmful, and that it's not necessarily going to work in your favor or kind of be conducive to all the things that you would like to be doing, these comedy videos, these original songs, and whatever else you've got to kind of, have in the fire right now. But is it ever in the back of your head to kind of like, man, I really want to have like that classic album everyone remembers or everybody refers back to? Is that something that's tempting to you, or is the cake like a lie?
I think in most cases, the cake is. I mean, maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I think that traditional success in the music industry, the cake is kind of a lie for most people, or overwhelmingly musicians. It doesn't work out that way. But I don't look for traditional music success at all. If it happens to, there's some ways where I have kind of stumbled on it. Like I've had songs in commercials or things like that, and that's really cool when it happens. And I've been able to tour, thankfully, with my friends, and those have been, way more than I could ever ask for in a tour, and a ton of fun. So when I stumble upon it, I'm happy when it does, but I'm not seeking any type of traditional music success, because I find it just it's just a waste of effort into something that isn't going to give you any returns. I'm way more interested in doing things on the internet.
Because it seems like, and this is just my perspective as a music fan, and now kind of stumbling into the music industry just off of kind of just by virtue of doing what I do, not because anybody was like, hey, come on in. But kind of growing up and listening to music very seriously and taking music very seriously, even as I was listening to artists, who had a strong comedic point to their music. And now that I'm kind of here, the more that I'm able to kind of, learn and see how things really work, those really classic albums that I thought were so great, and they are definitely great. I mean, I don't think there's any reason that you shouldn't pick up a copy of what Pet sounds and realize how great and catchy and fun and enjoyable of a record that is. But I think now that I'm here, you just kind of slowly realize just how manufactured it all is. Like even the really great parts and how much and sort of how little of a role great music ends up playing in a classic record. Like the great music is obviously there, but a big chunk of it was also like the marketing end of things.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, if you go on to a website like Rate Your Music, for example, where just like all the reviews, all the opinions are completely user generated. Like if you look at albums from just the 50s or the 60s or the 70s on that website, pretty much every album on that site that they say is great, like is just like in lockstep with pretty much everything that Rolling Stone said was great back in the day, you know. But once you start to like move forward a little bit, and now that we're in the internet age, often you'll find that what the public says, you know, in this democratized kind of way, this is amazing, will vary pretty strongly from what the critics say sometimes. Yeah,
people have a stronger say now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I think in this age, I mean, do you think there's even such a thing as a classic record? Can we have a classic record? Is anybody going to remember any of this shit 15 years from now? You know, and not to say that there isn't good music coming out right now. I think there is, but
there's just so much of it.
There's just so much of it, and it all just seems so fractured to the point where, like, is anybody going to remember anything? You know, because it just seems like we're so on to the next thing all the time. Yeah. I mean, there are only a few records over the past 5 years that I can recall as being something where I actually feel like the greater world of music actually like paused for a second to be like, wow, you know, and then was on to the next thing. But at least there was that, you know, initial pause for a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not getting these really lengthy, successful promotional campaigns after the release of a record. More often than not, as soon as an album is released, that's like its lowest relevance point. Like they kind of just build up the hype for months and months and months and months and months up to the point of the release of the album. And then once the album is out, like all discussion just goes away. Like some reviews pop out, but then we're talking about whatever album is being hyped the next week, which is something that more artists today are kind of opting out of by just releasing albums out of the blue.
Yeah.
But
I think there will be classic albums. I think we're going to look back and there's going to be a handful of them that really represent, I don't know, 2015. But it's just hard to say now.
You think in the 2020s we're going to look back at this Kendrick record?
I think so, yeah. I do.
I think so as well, but it'll be interesting to sort of see how the generation that hardly focused on anything for more than a few minutes will remember its own history. You know, will they remember it?
Yeah.
With the same kind of accuracy or sometimes inaccuracy as the people who lived through it? I mean, because certainly, you know, there's. I haven't seen as many people kind of calling foul on the whole NWA movie that just dropped, which, you know, glossed over a ton of NWA history.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard that some of it is pretty dishonest, to where it's like that them being misogynistic is completely taken out of the movie. Apparently, like it's
pretty much taken out of the movie, and the very loud and obvious beef that was going on between Dr. Dre and Eazy-E is like completely erased out of the movie.
That's weird, because it's not like people don't know about that.
Yeah, like the songs are all over the Chronic.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually even a part in the movie where Eazy-E is like driving and he sees a billboard for the Chronic and he like smiles at it. Like, yeah, that's my man Dre right there.
Really?
Yeah, and meanwhile, there's songs on that record that blatantly make fun of him.
Yeah, like the first song is just all about it's just all criticizing Eazy-E. It's entirely just talking about how much he sucks and how much of an asshole.
So yeah, you know,
yeah, that's my friend.
So stuff like that is completely, you know, like glossed over, and it's something that, you know, when I was listening to Dr. Dre's new record, I gave him the benefit of the doubt because there were so many tracks on there where he's like, yo, my dude Eazy's looking at me from beyond the grave. He thinks I'm doing good. You know, and maybe after all those years, you know, nobody could stay mad for that long, especially at somebody who, you know, was so key to your success and also like so I want to say key to your success and also died so abruptly, you know, and so unnecessarily. But then,
it would be a bit strange if he continued the beef going after his untimely passing.
Yeah, absolutely.
that would be a bit distasteful.
But then simultaneously to just blatantly omit that whole thing from the movie that you were directly involved in.
Yeah.
And instead play it like things are all hunky dory. Not only that, but Dr. Dre's character in that movie, super nice guy. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Totally nice dude who was just surrounded by all these bad behaving people.
Yeah, like come on, like you can still be a legend, but it's you can be honest. Like I don't know. He's a legend. That's another kind of in his business. I don't know.
That's another kind of instance of
revisionist history, maybe.
Not just revisionist history, but the cake being a lie. But like we were talking about earlier, because there's so much image building in the music industry that goes along with not only the marketing of your record and your music. I caught a talk not too long ago about it was at a music festival, Primavera Sound recently, where I was literally watching a panel of all these music writers talk about why they write about bands or why they write about certain bands or how bands break into the music industry. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with one of the dudes, and we were talking about people from Pitchfork, LA Times, freelancers for a lot of different venues. These people are in the industry. They write for music. They write about music professionally, or they're writing professionally, and they're talking about, well, the first thing that comes into my head is what is the narrative of this band, mm-hmm. And that's like the last thing on my fucking mind. Honestly, I don't care if you're and I feel for people who are in the situation, but it's not relevant to me that your mom and your dad came from a war-torn country, or that you're of a certain spiritual denomination, or that I don't know, you wear clothes a certain way, or that I don't know, you just had a really hard come up or something, or a really easy one. I don't really care. I just want to know if I enjoy your music ultimately.
Yeah. Though I think it's harder to write about just the type of music that they're making, rather than it's an easier it's a quicker grab of attention to say, I don't know, this person came from this background and here are the songs, rather than here are the songs.
It's true. This guy came from a cult. This guy was in a cult, and then he broke out of the cult, and then he came out with an amazing album. It's that stuff can be a little crazy, and the fact that people gravitate toward that stuff. It's not just the marketing, but also the music fans, who gravitate toward that stuff.
It's not like the industry is creating this system. It's they're playing into whatever is going to get in this place nowadays, the clicks.
Absolutely.
That's what's going to get the clicks.
Which leads to, a lot of fabrication. Not just by not just by the industry people too, but by the musicians themselves, because they're actively realizing this and they're manipulating this as well. I mean, we were already on the topic.
That's what's going on in the Straight Outta Compton movie.
Yeah, that's what's going on in the Straight Outta Compton movie, and that's what you could,
maybe he wouldn't be quite as popular and as in demand if the D. Barnes part of that story was in it,
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, also if the fact that, and not even just in the movie, but if everybody if they were telling the truth on that album right from the start, the title of the album would be Straight Outta Compton, except for Ice Cube, because Ice Cube wasn't straight out of Compton at the time. He actually went to, a much nicer school than the other dudes in the group.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, which they actually reference in the movie for a split second, but they don't actually tell you. He's sort of at, his more affluent high school at the very start of the film, but then he takes the bus, to where he lives after school. And, Ice Cube was actually very, very well educated in comparison with everybody else in the group. But the thing is, that's not something that they really talk about that well in NWA. And not that I think that that's a mark against him or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a mark against him at all.
No, but the thing is, but for people who are sort of hardcore into the idea of hip hop authenticity, to some of these purists, it could definitely be, especially since Ice Cube wasn't necessarily leading the kind of lifestyle that he was rapping about all the time. There's a part in the film where he actually says, one of the first singles or first tracks that ended up on NWA's debut record that Eazy-E recorded, he's like, I wrote this song about you, dude. Because he was, sort of telling a story from the perspective of Eazy-E, and not that they weren't saying real things in their music, but still, the idea of, a group of people coming together in this one place that nobody knows about and all experiencing these same things. That's way more marketable than this dude was actually from this other town, or, these guys all didn't have the same kind of life experience or whatever.
Yeah, of course.
The idea of like one group coming together and like forming like the fucking Power Rangers and then coming out with this amazing album is just like so much
of all forming into like Megatron, or what is the Power Rangers version of that?
I guess Voltron or whatever, just like the Zords. The Power Rangers, they had Zords.
yeah, they all get in there like cars that move together, and then they're this big NWA.
Absolutely, and the idea of doing that, the idea of that is just so much more sellable.
Yeah. I still want to see the movie, but did you like it? Even if it is even if there are some parts that are like glaringly dishonest, like it still seems like it would be a really interesting watch.
As a film, I thought the first half was like really well put together. In the second half, I think the dialogue and the characters aren't quite as strong as they were in the first half. Like I actually wish they stuck around sort of in that time period of the first half a little bit, where NWA was in the late 80s and kind of creating their music and living these certain experiences, and I wish they sort of delved into their personal lives during that point, and sort of did a better job of kind of showing their camaraderie a little bit more during that era of their career. But it kind of seems like they rushed through all of that a little bit so that they could get to their eventual breakup. Yeah. So there could be like a bit of a climax and some drama to the film, and it's a little disappointing because I guess I wouldn't say, even though some things were left out, that they were really trying to tell a big fat lie, but it was more like they were trying to rush through everything, and they had no choice but to leave all of this stuff
on a lot of stuff.
The cutting room floor. Like, if you're going to tell the story from NWA's inception to the point where Dr. Dre is going solo, that's a lot to pack in.
Yeah.
And you're not going to tell it all with any sort of detail in 90 minutes. All of a sudden we're skipping from one event to another, all of which happened and are portrayed in a relatively accurate degree on the screen, but there's so much more context that was just kind of left out. So I don't know.
Just to make sure that it's a successful movie.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of get the limitations, but I thought it would have been fantastic and also interesting if it had been told to the point where maybe Ice Cube broke off from the group, and then we kind of got that as one movie, and then they did a sequel, because the movie, even so far, has been incredibly successful.
Yeah, and they had that fantastic marketing campaign.
Sure, absolutely.
Where you could do straight out of whatever, and then a lot of people were making jokes out of it, and then those would, go semi-viral. And
the memes, man. Let people make some memes. Let people make some memes. The good meme marketing, man.
Yeah, that was good meme marketing. That was very good meme marketing on their point. And did you hear that they're making a sequel, or is that just some stuff I saw on Facebook?
I heard they were making a sequel, but the thing is, and I heard them talking about that sort of like on a panel. But the thing is, it just doesn't seem like they told, I guess, the whole story, I mean, I could see a sequel if they stopped off when Ice Cube left the group because he realized that he was getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe they'll just continue to make sequels until the movie is about them making the first movie.
Maybe. I don't know.
Like they get to sequel 4 and now it's all about casting for the first movie.
Maybe.
And
maybe
then
it is.
casting them for them to be casting. I don't know, that'd be kind of funny.
But still, it was a pretty cool film, and sort of seeing Ice Cube's son play Ice Cube was kind of a head trip.
Yeah, and just that the story is being told at this level
Yeah,
at all.
absolutely.
And knowing when this was made, I think Straight Outta Compton was made in 6 weeks, and I mean, no one could have foreseen 25 years later that it's going to be an entire movie. I mean, there's something really cool in that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like rags to riches story, you would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to see it. I'm surprised I haven't seen it yet, but it seems like a really interesting movie.
All right. Well, I think we're just going to leave it off here since we're just shooting the shit over movies at this point. We're not even talking about you anymore.
We're talking about, we talked a lot about Eazy-E.
You're just an hour worth of material, and then we just branched off into NWA.
Yeah. That's where all the conversations lead with me. It's just an hour into it, we just start talking about NWA. That's not true. But that would be a funny scenario if that was the case.
All right. I want to thank Rob Scallon for coming onto my podcast and talking about his YouTube channel, being a musician in the modern age, and just doing all the fantastic stuff that he does on a regular basis.
Right back at you, Anthony. Best teeth in the game.
Best fucking teeth in the game. Thank you. Finally, some recognition. I'm going to link to Rob's YouTube channel, his Twitter, also his Patreon, where you can do what he calls a super subscribe. Yeah,
the Patreon. I guess back on that, being a musician in the modern age, Patreon is a huge game changer. I've actually been to the viewers. I've been kind of hounding Anthony to get on Patreon. And keep recommending it to him.
Ugh, I'm so bad at it though. You know, I'm thinking about it.
I really think you should. Like for me, it's just such a huge game changer, and it's so fantastic to have that steady Patreon funding from support directly from the people that are actually watching you, rather than having to do sponsors or do viral videos all the time. It's just. I can't say enough good things about Patreon. A huge reason why I was able to go full time was that I went full time at the same time Patreon started. So I had that extra support, and it's fantastic. I think you should get on it, and you should not worry about the people that are gonna go, oh, you're making money doing things.
Okay, if you guys see me jumping back onto Patreon or jumping onto Patreon and going full force on it, it's Rob's fault. So
you can
take it up with Rob.
Yeah, you can go ahead and tweet at me that I'm making Anthony a sellout or something.
All right, dude. Thanks for coming on again, and I'm looking forward to all the new videos.
Thanks so much, dude. Thanks.
All right,
awesome.
Bye.
See ya.